Sammy Miller lived for two things: baseball and, though he'd never admit it to his buddies, the booming electric voice of Elvis Presley. His world was small, bounded by the dusty baseball diamond behind his house and the crackling radio in his room. He wasn't the tallest kid or the fastest, but put a bat in his hands and something just clicked. His prized possession wasn't a fancy bike or a comic book collection. It was his baseball bat. It wasn't new, not by a long shot. The wood was worn smooth in places, from countless swings, and there was a faint, almost invisible crack near the barrel that Sammy patched meticulously with electrical tape, convinced it added character, not weakness. That bat was an extension of him, a trusted friend in every game, every practice, every imaginary World Series Grand Slam in his backyard. But lately, baseball had taken a backseat to a different kind of thunder. The air in Tupelo, Mississippi, usually thick with the hum of cicadas, and the distant sound of trains now vibrated with a different kind of buzz. Elvis Presley was coming home. Not just for a quick visit, but for a full-blown concert right here in their little town. The news had swept through Tupelo like a wildfire, igniting excitement in every corner. For weeks, it was all anyone could talk about. Grown-ups, usually so serious, walked around with goofy smiles. Teenagers swooned just saying his name, and kids like Sammy. They felt the electricity too, even if they couldn't quite put words to it. Sammy had tried to resist the fever at first. "He's just a singer," he'd scoffed to his friend Mike as they walked past a concert hall, already draped with banners proclaiming, "Elvis live." Mike had just shaken his head. "Just a singer, Sammy. He's the king. Everyone wants to see him." And Mike was right. Posters with Elvis's famous sneer and slicked-back hair seemed to multiply overnight, plastered on every lamppost, every shop window. His songs, once just background noise on the radio, now pulsed with a new kind of energy echoing from every open window. The problem for Sammy wasn't a lack of desire. It was a lack of money. Tickets were being scalped for unheard-of prices. Mr. Henderson, the grocer, had told Sammy's mom that a single ticket was going for more than a week's worth of groceries. Sammy's family wasn't poor, not exactly, but money was always tight. His dad worked long hours at the mill and his mom took in mending. There was always enough for food on the table and clothes on their backs, but luxuries like a concert ticket for a 13-year-old boy. That was a dream as far away as the moon. He knew better than to even ask. He'd seen the tired lines around his mom's eyes, the way his dad sighed when he looked at the bills. No, a ticket was out of the question. He tried to convince himself it didn't matter. He'd listen to the radio, imagine the crowd, picture Elvis on stage, but deep down a knot of longing tightened in his chest. This wasn't just any concert. It was Elvis in Tupelo. It felt like history happening right in front of him, and he was stuck on the sidelines. Every day the buzz grew louder. The town was transforming. People were coming in from neighboring counties, from other states even, all wanting to be part of the magic. Sammy would walk past the concert hall drawn by an invisible pull and just stand there watching the growing lines, listening to the excited chatter. He'd see kids his age clutching tickets, their faces alight with anticipation, and a pang of envy, sharp and insistent, would pierce his carefully constructed indifference. One afternoon, sitting on his porch polishing his bat, a new thought, desperate and audacious, began to form in his mind. He'd been listening to the radio, and a news report had just mentioned how scalpers are having a field day, with tickets going for anything a fan is willing to pay. Anything a fan is willing to pay. The words echoed in his head. He looked down at the bat in his hands, its worn wood feeling warm and familiar. It was the most valuable thing he owned, not in terms of money, but in what it meant to him. Years of games, of triumphs and losses, of shared laughter with friends, were soaked into its grain. A baseball bat for a concert ticket. The idea was crazy, insane. It was a betrayal of everything he loved about the game. Then he thought of Elvis, of that voice, of the energy everyone described, the way he moved on stage. It wasn't just a concert. It was a chance to witness something legendary, something he'd tell his grandchildren about. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a moment that felt bigger than anything else. He gripped the bat tighter, feeling the familiar weight, the comforting balance. Could he really give it up? The thought churned in his stomach. It was like choosing between two parts of himself. But the longing to see Elvis was a powerful current, pulling him further and further into its irresistible flow. He closed his eyes, picturing the stage lights, the roar of the crowd. The king himself, the decision, though terrifying, began to solidify. He would find a ticket no matter the cost. And if the cost was his most cherished possession, then so be it. The bat had given him joy on the field. Maybe now it could give him a different kind of joy, a taste of history. He opened his eyes, a new resolve hardening his young face. It was crazy, but it was also his only shot. He stood up, carefully placing the bat against the wall, looking at it not just as a piece of sporting equipment, but as a potential gateway to a dream. The next day, he would go looking. He would find someone who wanted a baseball bat more than they wanted an Elvis ticket. It was a long shot, but he had to try. The king was calling, and Sammy Miller was determined to answer. The next morning, Sammy woke with a knot in his stomach, a strange mix of fear and excitement. The idea he'd cooked up yesterday still felt audacious, borderline reckless. How would he even start? He couldn't just walk up to strangers and offer his bat for a concert ticket. He wasn't a salesman, and this wasn't a typical transaction. This was personal. He ate his breakfast in silence, picking at his grits, his mind racing. His mom noticed his quietness. "Everything all right, Sammy?" she asked, her brow furrowed with a hint of concern. He just nodded, forcing a small smile. He couldn't tell her. She'd think he was crazy, or worse, she'd worry about him giving up something so important. After finishing his chores, Sammy retrieved his bat. He ran his hand over the smooth wood, feeling the faint bump of the tape over the crack. This bat had been with him through countless games. He remembered the time he hit his first home run with it, the satisfying crack as the ball soared over the fence, the cheers of his teammate. He remembered countless afternoons spent practicing a thwack of the bat against the ball, echoing through the quiet streets. Could he really let all that go? A wave of doubt washed over him, making his resolve waver. But then he thought of Elvis. He thought of the stories he'd heard, the way people talked about him like he was more than human, almost like a force of nature. He thought of the music that made him want to move even when he was just sitting in his room. This wasn't just a concert ticket. It was a pass to something magical, something that would live in his memory forever. Baseball was always there, he reasoned, but Elvis, in Tupelo, this was a once-in-a-lifetime event. He tucked the bat under his arm and headed out, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He didn't have a plan, just a vague notion of wandering near the concert venue, seeing if anyone was looking to sell a ticket. The street was already bustling, even though the concert was still days away. People milled about, some clutching Elvis records, others just soaking in the festive atmosphere. As he got closer to the Tupelo Fairgrounds where the concert was to be held, the crowd thickened. He saw a man holding up a small hand-drawn sign, "Ticket for sale." Sammy's breath caught in his throat. This was it. He walked slowly towards the man, his eyes fixed on the sign, his grip tightening on his bat. The man was older, with a gruff voice and tired eyes. He looked impatient, like he'd been standing there a long time. "Ticket, son? You got the cash?" he asked, spotting Sammy. Sammy gulped. "No, sir," he stammered. "But I have something else, something valuable. It's a really good bat, solid wood. I've hit a lot of home runs with it." The man eyed the bat, then Sammy, a skeptical look on his face. "A bat? What am I going to do with a baseball bat, kid? I need cash. I got a family to feed." He turned away, dismissing Sammy. Disappointment crashed over Sammy, heavy and immediate. Of course it was a stupid idea. What was he thinking? Sammy knotted his throat tight. More than anything, sir. The man scratched his chin. Tell you what, I got a nephew who's just getting into baseball. Never had a good bat. Always using some cheap thing. My sister keeps complaining. He looked at Sammy's bat again, a little less dismissive this time. This bat. It looks like it's been loved. Been used for something real. You sure you want to part with it? Yes, sir, Sammy said the words coming out stronger than he expected. I'm sure he pictured the concert, the music, the lights, the sacrifice felt worth it. The man sighed, a long, drawn-out sound. All right, 1 ticket for the bat. He held out the crumpled hamper. Sammy's hand trembled as he reached for it. It was a simple piece of cardstock. Nothing fancy, but to him it felt like a golden key. He grasped it tightly, almost afraid it would vanish. Then slowly, carefully, he handed over his bat. He gave it a couple of practice swings, a faint smile playing on his lips. She's a beauty, son. Hope my nephew appreciates it. He gave Sammy a nod, then turned and walked away, the bat tucked under his arm. Sammy stood there for a moment, rooted to the spot. His hand, where the bat had been, felt strangely empty, lighter than air. He looked down at the ticket in his hand. It was real. He had done it. A thrill pure and unadulterated. The home runs, the practices, the comfort of its familiar weight, all gone. He closed his eyes, a pang of regret sharp and sudden. Had he made a mistake? Was a concert really worth giving up his best friend, his connection to his favorite sport? He opened his eyes, looking at the ticket again. It was just a piece of paper, but it represented a dream. He took a deep breath, trying to push away the doubt. No, he hadn't made a mistake. He had traded one passion for another, one dream for a moment of living history. He had to believe that he had too. He turned and walked away from the fairgrounds, the ticket clutched tightly in his hand, the echo of an absent bat, a haunting reminder of the impossible choice he had just made. The concert was in 2 days. 2 days to process what he'd done and 2 days to prepare for the biggest night of his young life. The next 2 days felt like an eternity in a blink of an eye, all at once. Sammy spent them in a haze, the weight of his decision swinging between exhilarating triumph and nagging regret. He tried to hide the absence of his bat from his parents. When his dad asked if he was going to practice, Sammy mumbled something about a stomach ache, about needing a break. His mom, usually quick to notice, was distracted by the town's Elvis fever, too caught up in the general excitement. They didn't push. He kept the ticket hidden under his mattress, pulling it out occasionally just to look at it, to convince himself it was real. It was a simple printed ticket, faded around the edges, but to Sammy it glowed with an almost mystical light. Every time he touched it, a jolt of anticipation went through him, chasing away the lingering sadness about the bat. This was it. He was going to see Elvis. The evening of the concert arrived, cloaked in a humid Mississippi twilight. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and the distant murmur of an excited crowd. Sammy wore his best, cleanest shirt, the one his mom usually saved for church. He felt a nervous flutter in his stomach that had nothing to do with stomach aches and everything to do with pure, unadulterated excitement. I'm just going for a walk, Mom, he called out, his voice a little too loud, a little too strained. Don't be out too late, she called back, already engrossed in her sewing. He slipped out the door, the ticket tucked securely in his front pocket. The streets were alive. Cars, usually scarce after dark, lined the roads for blocks around the fairgrounds. People walked in streams, all heading in the same direction, their faces alight with a shared purpose. The air vibrated with a sense of collective anticipation. Laughter, excited chatter, and snippets of Elvis songs hummed through the night. Sammy felt a part of something huge, something historical. He wasn't just a boy from Tupelo anymore. He was one of thousands, converging on a single point, drawn by the magnetic pull of a legend. He walked faster, eager to join the throng, his small frame almost lost in the sea of eager fans. As he neared the fairgrounds, the sound grew from a murmur to a roar. Lights blazed from the concert hall, painting the night sky in a warm, inviting glow. The line to get in stretched for what seemed like miles, snaking around corners, packed shoulder to shoulder with people of all ages. Sammy joined the end of it, feeling a thrill run through him. He was really here. The line moved slowly, giving him time to soak it all in. He heard snippets of conversations. "Can you believe he's really here? I got my hair done just like his. Oh, I hope he sings Heartbreak Hotel." Sammy felt a grin spread across his face. He was surrounded by people who loved Elvis as much as he did. When he finally reached the entrance, the security guard, a burly man with a kind smile, took his ticket. Sammy held his breath, watching as the man tore it cleanly. "Enjoy the show, son," the guard boomed, handing him the stub. Sammy clutched the stub like it was solid gold he was in. He stepped into the vast, cavernous space of the concert hall. The sheer size of the crowd was overwhelming. Thousands of seats, most of them already filled, stretched before him. The air was thick with excitement, anticipation, and the faint scent of sweat and hairspray. Checked his ticket stub for his seat number. Section C, row 5, seat 12. Section C, that was close. Much closer than he dared to hope for. He navigated through the bustling aisles, dodging eager fans and vendors, hawking refreshments. People were already clapping, stomping their feet, a rhythmic pulse building in the hall. He found his row, then his seat. It was perfect. He was close enough to see the stage clearly, close enough to feel the heat of the anticipation radiating from the other fans. The stage itself was enormous, draped in dark velvet curtains, bathed in a soft, expectant light. Microphones stood waiting, instruments glinting under the stage lights. Sammy settled into his seat, feeling a mix of awe and disbelief. He had traded his most prized possession for this view, for this feeling, for this moment. The hollowness he'd felt about the bat was still there, a faint echo, but it was overshadowed by the sheer exhilarating reality of where he was. The lights in the hall dimmed, plunging the audience into a hushed darkness, broken only by the glow of emergency exits and the excited whispers of the crowd. A single spotlight hit the stage. A wave of collective intake of breath swept through the hall. This was it, the moment he had sacrificed his bat for. His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drumbeat of pure excitement. He leaned forward, utterly captivated, ready for the dream to begin. The king was about to appear. And Sammy Miller, who had traded his most cherished possession for this very moment, was finally here to witness it. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second and opened them wide, determined not to miss a single second. The roar was building. Any lingering doubts about the bat melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of wonder. A hush, thick with anticipation, fell over the crowd as the stage lights brightened. Then a voice, deep and resonant, boomed through the speakers, introducing the one and only Elvis Presley. The roar that erupted next was deafening, a wave of sound that physically hit Sammy, making the seat vibrate beneath him. It was unlike anything he had ever heard. A primal surge of collective adoration, and then he was there. Elvis. He burst onto the stage, a dazzling figure in a shimmering gold lame suit, his hair slicked back, his smile a confident flash. He looked even bigger, more maniacal than any photo or radio voice could convey. He moved with an effortless grace, a powerful energy radiating from him that seemed to fill every corner of the vast hall. Sammy gasped, joining the collective gasp of thousands. He was mesmerized. Elvis didn't just walk. He glided, he strutted. He owned the stage. The music started a driving rhythm that went straight to Sammy's bones, and Elvis launched into his first song. His voice, live and unadulterated, was even more powerful than on the radio. Richer, more soulful, with a raw edge that sent shivers down Sammy's spine. From his surprisingly good seat in Section C, Sammy watched completely spellbound. He couldn't take his eyes off the stage. Elvis moved, his hips swaying, his legs kicking, his arms gesturing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The crowd screamed, clapped, and stomped along, caught in the infectious energy. girls in the front rows were practically fainting, their high-pitched cries cutting through the music. Even the grown men around Sammy were tapping their feet, their eyes wide with awe. Every song was a performance. Elvis didn't just sing, he acted out the lyrics, conveying every emotion, every heartbreak, every thrill. Sammy found himself swaying, tapping his foot, completely lost in the moment. He forgot about the bat, forgot about school, forgot about everything but the man on stage. This was magic. This was what he had given up so much for, and in that moment it felt more than worth it. He noticed the small details. The way Elvis's dark hair caught the stage lights, the glint of his rings as he gestured, the beads of sweat that formed on his brow as he poured his heart into each song. Elvis looked out into the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the thousands of faces, and Sammy felt for a fleeting moment like their eyes met. A jolt went through him, a feeling of personal connection even amidst the enormous crowd. During one of his signature high-energy numbers, Elvis worked the stage, moving from one side to the other, leaning into the crowd, extending his hand. The screaming intensified. He paused just for a beat on Sammy's side of the stage. He held his microphone out, encouraging the crowd to sing along, his famous sneer playing on his lips. Then it happened. Elvis finished a particularly rousing chorus, the crowd roaring its approval. He took a deep bow, grinning widely as he straightened up. He spotted something in the crowd. Sammy couldn't tell what it was, but Elvis's eyes seemed to land somewhere near him. And then, almost without thinking, Elvis took off a small white handkerchief from his pocket, wiped his brow with it, and with a flourish tossed it into the audience. It was a small gesture, but the crowd erupted. Everyone reached hands grasping, hoping to catch the little piece of Elvis. Sammy, still in a daze, barely reacted. He watched as the handkerchief sailed through the air, tumbling end over end. And then, as if by some incredible, unbelievable twist of fate, it landed right in his lap. Sammy stared at it, wide-eyed. Collective groan of disappointment rose from the people around him who had missed it, followed by envious whispers. He looked down at the soft white cloth lying on his denim-clad knees. It was warm still, carrying the faint scent of Elvis's cologne. It was real. He had actually caught something Elvis had touched, something he had thrown. Carefully picked it up, his fingers tracing the soft fabric. It was just a handkerchief, but it felt like a direct connection to the king himself. A tangible piece of the magic he was witnessing. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket right next to his heart, feeling its warmth through the fabric of his shirt. Elvis, seemingly unaware of the small commotion he had caused, moved on to the next song, his powerful voice filling the hall once more. But for Sammy, the concert had just taken on a whole new dimension. He hadn't just watched a show, he had been touched by it. The handkerchief was proof. The gift of a concert ticket had already given him more than he could have imagined. But the night, he sensed, was far from over. A seed of a new kind of wonder had been planted in his heart. The concert ended in a thunderous explosion of sound, applause, and screams. Elvis took his final bows, his face shining with sweat and exhilaration, before disappearing behind the velvet curtains. The house lights came up slowly, revealing a crowd that seemed both ecstatic and dazed, as if waking from a powerful dream. Sammy, still clutching the precious handkerchief in his pocket, felt like he was floating. The energy in the hall slowly dissipated as people began to shuffle toward the exits, buzzing with post-concert chatter. Sammy, however, found himself unable to move. He just sat there, soaking in the last lingering echoes of the music, the fading scent of the crowd. He wanted to hold on to the feeling for as long as possible. He was one of the last few people left in his section when a burly usher, looking tired but patient, approached his row. "All right, son. Time to head out. We gotta clear the hall," Sammy nodded, rising slowly. He began to make his way towards the main exit, still feeling slightly disoriented. The sheer magnitude of what he had just witnessed was settling in as he walked. A sudden, urgent need for a restroom hit him. He spotted a sign for the men's room near a less crowded corridor. He veered off, following the arrow, figuring it would be quicker than waiting in the long lines near the main exit. He found the restroom, relieved himself, and then, feeling a little more grounded, prepared to head back out. But as he pushed open the door, he noticed something. The corridor he was in wasn't empty. It seemed to lead further back away from the general public area. There were crew members bustling about, hauling equipment, speaking into walkie-talkies. Sammy hesitated. He knew he shouldn't be here. This was clearly an unauthorized area, but curiosity. Powerful magnet pulled him forward just to peek, he told himself, just to see what it was like behind the scenes. He took a few steps, trying to look inconspicuous, like he knew where he was going. He saw open doors leading to dressing rooms, the air thick with a mix of cologne sweat and something else, the faint, lingering scent of excitement. He heard voices, muffled but distinct. He rounded the corner and then he stopped, dead in his tracks. Standing just a few feet away, leaning against a wall, talking to a man in a sharp suit, was Elvis Presley. He wasn't in his gold, lame suit anymore. He had changed into a more casual outfit, black trousers and a simple open-necked shirt. His hair was still perfectly coiffed, but he looked a little tired, a little less like a shimmering god, and more like a regular person, albeit an extraordinarily famous one. He was laughing, a low, easy chuckle, as the man in the suit spoke to him. Sammy froze, his heart leaping into his throat. This was impossible. He was just feet away from the king in person, not on a stage bathed in light, but right here in the quiet, almost mundane reality of a packed corridor. He instinctively shrunk back against the wall, hoping he hadn't been seen. He felt a blush creep up his neck. He was trespassing. He watched, captivated. He could hear snippets of their conversation. Now they were talking about the show, about travel plans. Elvis seemed relaxed, his voice softer than it was on stage, but still carrying that distinct, unforgettable cadence. He saw the man in the suit glance in his direction. Sammy held his breath, bracing for a stern reprimand for a security guard to appear and escort him out. The man just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Elvis, who then turned his head, his blue eyes sweeping over Sammy's hiding spot. For a moment, Sammy thought Elvis hadn't noticed him. Then Elvis's gaze settled on him, a flicker of surprise then amusement passing over his features. He offered a small, knowing smile. "Well now," Elvis said, his voice surprisingly gentle, with that famous drawl. "Looks like we got ourselves a little stray here, Bob." He looked at Sammy directly. "Lost son." Sammy felt his face flush even deeper. He wanted to disappear. I was going to the restroom, and I got a little turned around." It was a flimsy excuse, and he knew it. Elvis chuckled again, a warm, genuine sound. Pushed himself off the wall. "Happens to the best of us, big old place, this." He wasn't annoyed. He was kind. Sammy just nodded, unable to speak. He was standing in front of Elvis Presley, the man who had thrown him a handkerchief just an hour ago, the man he had sacrificed his bat to see. Elvis's eyes, bright and perceptive, seemed to take in his nervous posture. He noticed the slight tremor in Sammy's hands. "You enjoyed the show?" he asked, his voice softer now. Sammy managed to nod, a bigger one this time. "Yes, sir, more than anything. It was unforgettable." Elvis smiled, a genuine warm smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Unforgettable, huh? Well, that's what we aimed for, son. You got a look in your eyes like you really believed it." The man in the suit, Bob, cleared his throat subtly. "Elvis, we really should be heading out. The car's waiting." Elvis waved a dismissive hand. "Hold on a minute, Bob. This young man looks like he's got a story." He looked back at Sammy. "So unforgettable." That's quite the compliment. You came a long way to see us." Sammy swallowed, gathering his courage. This was his chance. He had to tell him. He had to explain the bat. He had to explain what this concert truly meant to him. The warmth of the handkerchief in his pocket seemed to give him strength. "Sir," he began, his voice gaining a little more confidence. I gave up something big to be here tonight." And what might that be, son?" This was it. The connection was made. The journey was about to take an even more incredible turn. Sammy took a deep breath, his heart still thumping like a drum, but a strange calm settling over him. He was standing in front of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, and Elvis was actually listening to him. He had to make this count. "My baseball bat, sir," Sammy said, his voice clear now, filled with a mixture of pride and vulnerability. "I traded my baseball bat for a ticket to your show." Elvis' eyeballs shut up. The man in the suit, Bob, looked surprised too. "You mean your affles?" repeated, his head tilted. "You mean your actual baseball bat?" Sammy nodded. "Yes, sir, my favorite one. It was all I had that was valuable enough to trade for a ticket." He quickly explained, recounting how desperate he had been to see the show, how expensive the tickets were, and how the bat had been his only option. He even mentioned the faint crack he'd taped up, the countless games he'd played with it, the home runs he'd hit. Elvis listened intently, his expression shifting from surprise to something else. Curiosity, then understanding, and finally a deep, almost contemplative look. He didn't interrupt, letting Sammy tell his whole story from the day the news of the concert broke to the anxious moment he handed over his prized possession. When Sammy finished, the corridor was silent for a moment, broken only by the distant hum of machinery. Elvis ran a hand through his hair, his gaze thoughtful. "A baseball bat," he murmured, more to himself than to Sammy. "That's quite a sacrifice, son, for a concert." He looked at Sammy, his blue eyes piercing. "You must really love music, huh?" "I love your music, sir," Sammy corrected, his cheeks coloring slightly. "And I love baseball. That bat was. It was like a part of me. But this concert, it felt like it was important. Like I had to be here." Elvis nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "The feeling that something is just important, more important than anything else right then." Paused, a faraway look in his eyes as if recalling his own similar moments of passion and sacrifice. "So you gave up something you loved for something else you loved. That takes guts, son, and a whole lot of heart, Bob." The manager stepped forward slightly. "Elvis, we really are running behind schedule. The plane won't wait." Elvis held up a hand, not taking his eyes off Sammy. "Just a moment, Bob. This young man has shown me something tonight." He looked back at Sammy. "So, you're a baseball player then? What position?" "Outfield, sir," Sammy replied, surprised by the question. "And pitcher, sometimes, but mostly outfield. I'm good at catching fly balls." Elvis smiled, a genuine warm smile. "A good outfielder, huh? Well, you always need a good bat to go with a good glove." He paused, his gaze softening. "You miss your bat, don't you?" Sammy swallowed. The quest, he did miss it. Even with the incredible experience of the concert, and now this unbelievable encounter, the absence of his bat was a persistent ache. "Yes, sir," he admitted softly, his voice barely a whisper. "More than I thought I would." Elvis nodded. "That's understandable. When something means that much to you, it leaves a hole when it's gone." He walked closer to Sammy, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "But you know what, son? Sometimes, when you give something up for a good reason, something even better comes back to you. It's the way the world works sometimes." Sammy looked up at him, bewildered. What could be better than seeing Elvis and getting a handkerchief? "Bob, remember that new bat I signed for the charity auction? The one in the case, the big hitter model?" Bob blinked. "Yes, Elvis. It's packed with the other memorabilia." "Why?" Elvis winked at Sammy. "Because I think we're going to make a little detour with it. This young man here, he showed true dedication tonight. The kind of dedication that deserves a reward." He looked back at Sammy, his eyes twinkling. "This was a miracle, sir." He finally managed, his voice cracking. Are you serious?" Elvis grinned. "Serious as a heart attack, son. Now you tell Bob here your full name and address, and we'll make sure it gets to you. And maybe, just maybe, I'll add something extra to it. A little something special, just for a boy who knows the value of a dream." He looked at Bob. "Make it happen, Bob, and make sure it's expedite." Bob sighed, a look of amused exasperation on his face, but he pulled out a small notepad. "All right, Elvis, if you insist. What's your name, son?" Sammy was still in a daze, but he quickly rattled off his name and address, his heart pounding with a new incredible kind of hope. Elvis Presley was going to send him a baseball bat, a signed bat. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was a turning point. And he knew with absolute certainty that he would never forget this night or the kindness of the king. Sammy could barely remember walking out of the fairgrounds that night. His feet felt light, his head spun with an exhilarating mix of disbelief and overwhelming joy. Clutched the precious handkerchief in his pocket, but now a new, even more incredible promise warmed his heart. Elvis Presley was sending him a new bat, and it would be signed. He stumbled home, trying to compose himself before he walked through the door. His parents would ask about his walk. How could he explain this? He couldn't, not yet. It felt too big, too fragile to put into words, especially before it actually happened. He slipped into his room, pulled the handkerchief from his pocket, and laid it carefully on his bedside table. He then checked under his mattress. The empty space where the ticket had been was a faint reminder of his sacrifice. But the memory was now tinged with a new kind of gratitude. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the encounter. Elvis's kind eyes, his gentle voice, the way he'd understood about the bat and the incredible promise. He fell asleep with a wide, incredulous smile on his face. The next few days were a blur of waiting. Every time the mailman came, Sammy rushed to the door, his heart leaping. Every knock, every car passing by made him jump. His parents noticed his unusual restlessness. "You feeling all right, Sammy?" his mom asked one afternoon, putting a hand on his forehead. "You seem a million miles away." "Just thinking, Mom," he mumbled, trying to act normal. He knew he was terrible at hiding things. Finally, on the fourth day, there was a knock on the door, different from the usual mail delivery. It was a delivery truck, a private courier service, something rare in their quiet neighborhood. A man in a crisp uniform held a long, rectangular box, carefully wrapped. "Package for Sammy Miller?" the man asked, holding out a clipboard. Sammy's heart stopped. Quickly signed his hand, trembling slightly, and took the box. It was surprisingly heavy, substantial. He thanked the man, who just smiled and tipped his cap, then hurried inside the box clutched to his chest. His parents looked up, curious. "What's that, Sammy?" his dad asked, putting down his newspaper. Sammy could barely breathe, placed the box on the kitchen table, his hands fumbling with the tape. His parents watched in expectant silence filling the room. He tore away the last of the wrapping paper, and there it was. Custom-made wooden display case nestled within the cardboard box with a velvet lining. And inside the case, resting on the plush fabric, was a baseball bat. It was magnificent. It was a rich dark wood, perfectly balanced, gleaming with a professional finish. It looked brand new, straight from a factory. It was a big hitter model, just like Elvis had said. But that wasn't all. Scrolled across the barrel in bold, elegant black ink was a signature. And beneath it a personal inscription carefully written, "To Sammy, for your heart and your dream keep swinging, boy, your friend Elvis." Sammy traced the words with a reverent finger. "Oh my goodness," his mom whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. His dad pushed up his glasses, leaning closer, a look of utter astonishment on his face. "Sammy," his dad said, his voice hushed, "where did you get this?" There was no hiding it now. With a shaky breath, Sammy told them everything. Told them about trading, his old bat, about the concert, about lingering backstage, about getting lost and stumbling upon Elvis. He recounted every word, every gesture, the kindness in Elvis's eyes, the casual way he had promised a new bat. He pulled the handkerchief from his pocket, still smelling faintly of cologne as proof of his earlier connection. His parents listened in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mix of disbelief, wonder, and a profound understanding. His mom had tears in her eyes. "My poor boy," she whispered, "giving up your bat like that. And all this time you never said a word." His dad picked up the bat carefully, holding it by the barrel so as not to smudge the signature. He tested its weight, its balance. "This is a fine bat, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Truly fine bat, and signed by Elvis Presley himself. This is incredible." He looked at Sammy. A deep pride in his eyes. "You did good, son. You made a bold choice, and it brought you something truly special." Sammy looked from the bat to his parents, feeling a warmth spread through him that was deeper than just pride. It was validation. They understood. They saw the value in what he had done, and the incredible generosity that had come back to him. The bat wasn't just a replacement for his old one. It was a symbol. It was a testament to following your dreams, to making sacrifices, and to the unexpected kindness that could bloom in the most surprising places. It was a direct connection to a man who, despite his immense fame, had taken a moment to truly see a boy and his dream. The gift wasn't just the bat. It was Elvis's recognition, his encouragement, his simple act of acknowledging a young boy's passion. It was a lesson in generosity and paying attention to the smaller moments even when you're a king. And Sammy knew with absolute certainty that this bat and the story behind it would truly be unforgettable. He already felt different, changed by this extraordinary encounter. Sammy spent the next few days in a dreamlike state, constantly revisiting the incredible events of the past week. The new bat, nestled safely in its display case, became the centerpiece of his room. He'd take it out, just to hold it, to run his fingers over the smooth, rich wood, to trace Elvis's signature and the heartfelt inscription, "Keep swinging, boy." Those words resonated deeply within him. His parents, still amazed, encouraged him to show it off, but Sammy felt a sense of reverence for it. It wasn't just a bat, it was a relic, a story, a connection to a moment of unexpected grace. He told his closest friends, Mike and Billy, but they could barely believe it. "You actually met him?" Mike kept asking, his eyes wide. "And he gave you that?" Billy peered closely at the signature, convinced it had to be a fake, until Sammy showed them the handkerchief and recounted the story in painstaking detail, his sincerity finally winning them over. One afternoon, a week after the concert, Sammy was practicing in his backyard, using his old spare bat, a cheap, flimsy thing compared to his former pride and joy. But even with that, he felt a new energy in his swings, a renewed purpose. He was still a baseball player. Elvis hadn't taken that from him. He had given it back, infused with something more profound. He heard a car pull up to the house, an unfamiliar black sedan. Sammy paused, curious. His mom went to the door, and Sammy heard muffled voices. Then his mom's surprised gasp. "Sammy, can you come here, please?" she called, her voice trembling slightly. Sammy walked to the living room, wiping his hands on his pants. Standing there next to his mom was Mr. Bob, Elvis's manager, the same man Sammy had seen backstage, and with him a friendly-looking man in a chauffeur's uniform. Sammy's eyes widened. "Mr. Bob," he stammered. Bob smiled, a little less gruff than before. "Sammy, good to see you again." He glanced at Sammy's mom. "Mrs. Miller, I hope we're not intruding. Elvis asked me to make a special delivery in person this time." Sammy's heart hammered. Bob reached into an inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small, elegantly wrapped pack. Elvis felt that while the bat was a good start, Bob said, his eyes twinkling, "He wanted to make sure you understood the real gift," he said. "To tell you this was just between you and him." But it wasn't just a guitar pick. It felt warm, as if it had just been held. And on the back, etched finely, were two words, "Always play." Sammy looked up, bewildered and touched. "Always play?" Bob nodded. Elvis said that's his philosophy. Whatever it is, whether it's music or baseball or just living your life, always play with heart. Always give it your all. Always stay true to the passion that makes you feel alive. He paused, his gaze softening. He said, "You understood that when you gave up your bat for a ticket." He said that kind of spirit is rare, and it's something to hold on to. Sammy felt tears prick his eyes. This was the real gift. Not just a signed bat, not just a physical object, but a piece of wisdom, a life lesson from the king himself. A personal message, just for him. He also said, Bob continued, lowering his voice slightly, that he heard you were a good outfielder. He said the world needs more people who can catch the dreams that are flying by, and that sometimes the biggest catches aren't on the baseball field, but in how you live your life. Sammy clutched the guitar pick. It was a call to action, an encouragement to live with passion and purpose. It was Elvis reaching out across the divide of fame and fortune to connect with a boy who had shown him something genuine. "Thank you, Mr. Bob," Sammy whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Please, please tell him thank you for everything." Bob smiled. "I will, Sammy. He wanted to make sure you got this personally. He wanted you to know that your sacrifice, your passion, it resonated with him." He gave Sammy a warm, fatherly nod. "Keep swinging, son, and keep playing." With that, Bob bid them farewell, promising to relay Sammy's gratitude to Elvis. Sammy watched the black car drive away, a profound sense of awe settling over him. He looked at the silver guitar pick in his hand, then at the display case with the bat. The bat was a magnificent gift, a symbol of Elvis's generosity. But the guitar pick and the words, "always play," those were the true, unforgettable gift. They were a direct personal message, a philosophy to guide him. It wasn't just about baseball or music, it was about life. It was about finding your passion, no matter the cost, and then living that passion with everything you had. He knew in that moment that his life had changed. Not just because he met Elvis or because he had a signed bat, but because he had received a piece of wisdom that would stay with him forever. He would always play, he would always swing. He would always live with the heart and dedication that Elvis had seen in him, and that truly was unforgettable. The arrival of Mr. Bob and the little silver guitar pick cemented the unlikeliness of Sammy's story for his parents. They had seen the bat, believed his tale. But the personal touch, the deliberate second interaction from Elvis made it truly sink in. His mom openly wept, touched by the king's unexpected kindness. His dad, usually reserved, kept shaking his head in quiet wonder. "Imagine that," he'd say, sometimes looking at the bat on display. "Elvis Presley taking the time for our boy." The bat, however, didn't stay in its case forever. Sammy loved looking at it, but he loved playing baseball more. After a week of careful consideration, he made a decision. He would use the bat, not in every game, not in every practice, saving it for special moments. But he wouldn't let it just sit there. Elvis told him to keep swinging, and Sammy intended to do just that. His first time bringing it to a game was a blur of nervous excitement. His teammates were in awe, crowding around to see the famous signature mic, and Billy recounted the story for anyone who'd listen. Sammy felt the weight of expectation, but also a surge of quiet confidence. This wasn't just any bat. This was a bat with a story, a bat gifted by a legend. He stepped up to the plate, the autographed barrel gleaming in the afternoon sun. He gripped it, feeling the familiar comfort of wood in his hands. But now it was amplified by the weight of its incredible origin. Took a deep breath, remembered Elvis's words, "Always play with heart." He swung, and the ball connected with a satisfying crack, soaring through the air. It wasn't a home run, but it was a solid hit driving in a run. He ran the bases, a wide grin on his face, feeling the warmth of the silver guitar pick he now carried in his pocket during every game. From that day on, something shifted in Sammy. He still loved baseball with all his heart, but his approach to life seemed to change. Elvis's words, "always play," became a quiet mantra in his mind. He approached his schoolwork with more dedication, even subjects he didn't particularly like. He started to see challenges, not as obstacles, but as opportunities to play with more heart, to find creative solutions. When he was faced with a tough decision, he thought about the sacrifice he'd made for the concert and the incredible reward that had come from it. Taught him about the value of passion, the importance of taking risks, and the unexpected kindness that could appear in the world. He became more observant, more empathetic. He started to notice the smaller acts of kindness around him, the quiet ways people helped each other just as Elvis had helped him. He began to understand that true generosity wasn't always about grand gestures, but about seeing someone, truly seeing them, and responding with genuine care. His friends noticed the change, too. Sammy seemed more focused, more confident, but also somehow calmer. He still loved to joke around, but there was a new depth to him. When Mike was struggling with his pitching, Sammy didn't just offer tips. He spent hours with him, patiently working through his frustrations, remembering how Elvis had taken the time for him. The bat became a legend in their small town. People would occasionally ask Sammy about it, about meeting Elvis. He always told the story not with boastfulness, but with a quiet pride and an underlying sense of gratitude. He made sure to emphasize not just the bat itself, but the unexpected connection, the generosity, and the wisdom Elvis had imparted. The king had not just given him a piece of memorabilia. He had given him a profound lesson. He had shown him that even the most famous people could be genuinely kind, that dreams could come true in the most unexpected ways, and that a single act of sacrifice, fueled by passion, could open doors to unimaginable blessings. Sammy continued to play baseball, his skills improving steadily. The signed bat, polished and cared for, was a constant reminder of that pivotal night. The most important gift wasn't the wood or the autograph. It was the invisible thread of inspiration that connected him to Elvis, a thread woven from kindness, understanding, and the timeless wisdom to always play. As he grew older, he carried that wisdom with him, knowing that the echoes of the king's generosity would resonate throughout his life, shaping his choices, his character, and his spirit. Years passed, stretching into decades. Sammy Miller grew from a wide-eyed boy into a man, his hair graying at the temples, but the spark in his eyes ignited that unforgettable night. In Tupelo never faded. He never became a professional baseball player, though he played semi-pro for a few years, a formidable hitter and a reliable outfielder. He went to college, studied hard, and eventually became a beloved high school history teacher, always finding ways to weave stories of human spirit and unexpected connections into his lessons. The Elvis Presley bat remained. It never again saw the rough and tumble of a full game after his semi-pro days, but it was lovingly displayed in a place of honor. In his study, nestled in its original velvet-lined case. It wasn't just embedded. It was a conversation starter, a prompt for the story he loved to tell. His own children and later his grandchildren would gather around eyes wide as Grandpa Sammy recounted the tale of the bat trade, the concert, the chance encounter, and the incredible generosity. He'd emphasize the details, the worn wood of his old bat, the desperate desire for the ticket, the kindness in Elvis's eyes, and most importantly, the simple, profound words, "Keep swinging, boy," and "always play." It wasn't just a bat, you see, he'd tell them, his voice warm with memory. It was a lesson. It taught me that sometimes to get something truly special, you have to be willing to let go of something you cherish. It taught me that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, and it taught me that whatever you do in life, you should do it with heart. The silver guitar pick with its E and the words, "always play," remained in his wallet, a constant, tangible reminder of that personal wisdom. He'd sometimes pull it out just to touch it, to feel the smooth metal, to recall the feeling of being seen and understood by someone who didn't have to bother. Sammy lived his life by Elvis's unofficial motto. In his teaching, he played with passion, bringing history to life for his students. In his relationships, he played with heart, nurturing his family and friends. When faced with setbacks or disappointments, he remembered the king's words, "Keep swinging, boy." It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of a legend's encouragement pushing him forward. He watched as Elvis's own star continued to shine even after his passing. He saw the documentaries, the movies, the continuing adoration for the man who had touched so many lives, including his own. He knew that for countless fans, Elvis was a voice, a performer, an icon. But for Sammy, Elvis was also a teacher, a generous spirit, a man who had seen a desperate boy and with a simple act of kindness had changed the course of his life. The bat itself, even as the years went by, seemed to retain a faint glow, a sense of its powerful origin. Sometimes, a former student would visit, remembering the Elvis bat. Story and Sammy would bring it out, dust off the case, and retell the tale. Each time it felt fresh, vital, a reminder of the magic that could happen when dreams and determination met unexpected grace. Sammy knew that he was just one of many people Elvis had touched, but the personal nature of his gift made it unique. It wasn't just an autograph collected in passing. It was an exchange, a recognition, a moment of profound human connection that transcended fame. As he looked back on his life, Sammy often thought about that young boy trading his most prized possession for a ticket. He had given up a bat, a piece of wood, for a chance to witness something extraordinary. And in return, he had received not just a new, far more magnificent bat, but a life lesson, a guiding philosophy, and a story that resonated with warmth, hope, and the enduring power of human kindness. That gift, from Elvis Presley to a young boy named Sammy Miller, was and would forever remain truly unforgettable. It was a legacy of inspiration passed down through generations, a testament to the King's generosity and the powerful impact one genuine connection can have on a life. And in every swing Sammy took, every lesson he taught, every story he shared, the echo of the King's voice lived on, reminding him to always play